You find some funny marks on trees around the place. I think this one here is natural, but 140 years ago, the explorer Augustus Gregory came through, and he came to this spot here, junction of two creeks. And what he found here was absolutely amazing. He found the remains of a large camp. Trees like this had all been cut down and ridge poles erected and all that sort of thing. It was pretty old. It was about 8 years old, he reckoned. I don't know, I think it might have been a little bit older than that. He looked around the camp, trying to find whose camp it might be, who carved their initials in the side. People like Leichhardt, for instance, did that all the time with all their camps. He looked for animal bones, because people like Leichhardt carted bullocks with them. Couldn't find anything, nothing at all. But he still figured that, well, Leichhardt's the only person who's been through here. Has to be his camp, because no one else had been operating in the area. Well, we know how the Indian Army operates when they do things like this. What they did was they'd move south and they'd establish a depot, a base camp, and from that they'd radiate out. Then they'd send the rest of the party further down, establish another one, do the same thing again. And what I'm wondering is that perhaps that camp that Gregory found, was one of those depots. The one thing we do know is that if Nixon's story is true, then he definitely did pass through this area.
From here, Nixon's expedition continued south. They travelled over 800 kilometres in a month, the last part through the Tanami Desert, a hot, flat, featureless place. We don't know what role Lieutenant Nixon played in the expedition, but we do know that one day he climbed a hill, which was later named Mount Singapore by the expedition. I suspect he was up there to get a reading of latitude and longitude, using a sextant. But when he looked to the south, he made a remarkable discovery.
I'll just read you something from his journal here. May the 15th, 1832. On reaching the summit of the hill, no words can express the astonishment I felt at the magical change of scenery. After having travelled for so many days over nothing but barren hills and parching plains and having to dig for water every day, I saw below me a low and level country through which a broad sheet of water extended.
Nixon claims that he saw small boats gliding through a maze of narrow channels and people fishing with nets. On the opposite shore, he could see a cluster of houses in a grove of trees. He reckoned he'd discovered a settlement of 300 Dutch people in the middle of Australia. According to his journal, Nixon and his party stayed 8 days and learned about the history and lifestyle of his Dutch descendants. Nixon was the last European to ever see this community. No one knows what became of the Dutch, and the remains of their village have never been seen since. The problem lies with Nixon's journal. In it he noted the latitude and longitude of the hill near the village. But those coordinates meet in this sort of country. There's no permanent water here and no hills. Something's drastically wrong with Nixon's navigation.
Lieutenant Nixon would have set his latitude using one of these things here. They're a sextant, and they were designed for use on board ship, where you always had a perfectly flat horizon no matter where you were in the world. But once you take these things onto land, it's a different story. You've got ups and downs and heights and all sorts of things, and I think that he forgot that. Because every 150 foot you are in elevation above sea level, you're in fact 12 nautical miles further to the south than what the instrument tells you. I'm just beginning to wonder if he took that into account. And if he didn't, that means I should be looking further to the south down there.
What fascinates me is that if a Dutch settlement did exist in this vast, lonely place, how on earth did they get there? Where did they come from? Nixon learned that 80 men and 10 women had survived a shipwreck on the West Australian coast. But a shortage of food forced them to move. Apparently, they walked east towards the rising sun. In this part of the country, the only easy way inland is to follow the Fitzroy River. It forms a natural corridor between the rugged Kimberley and the Great Sandy Desert. But can we be sure the Dutch undertook this journey? What evidence is there to say that they may have travelled through this part of Australia?
Have a go at this. You see something like this and it's absolutely mind-boggling because clearly this is not Aboriginal. Right here we're almost 800 kilometres in from the coastline and yet we can come up to rock and find an engraving like this. This is not a painting, this is chipped into the rock, and that makes something very special about this because this rock is extremely hard, and to chip a design or a drawing like this into this rock, you've got to have some sort of iron tool or something. It looks almost like a female, sort of medieval type of era. And the face has really got a three-dimensional aspect to it. Who did it? Dunno. But maybe, just maybe, it could be Dutchmen walking inland. This is typical Kimberley country. Lots and lots of rock and spinifex for hundreds and hundreds of miles. And that's horrible stuff to walk through because it's also got the name of porcupine grass for the same reason that it's got all these spikes at the end of each leaf there, and they're like needle-sharp things that dig into you, and sometimes they even break off, so to walk through it would be an extremely painful experience.
Imagine Dutch men and women trudging through this sort of country for months on end. What baffles me is that if this story's true, why did the Dutch walk east over 1,000 kilometres into unknown country? They had no maps, their supplies were low, and water was scarce. Nixon was told many died along the way. Yet, despite these amazing odds, they apparently crossed a final ridge and followed the creek to the large stretch of water that Nixon saw from his Mount Singapore 170 years later.
This little box of tricks here is what you call a GPS, Global Positioning System. And basically what that does is it talks to satellites, lets me know where I am on the Earth's surface. Handy little bit of kit. Of course, I remember years and years ago when I was a digger in the Australian Army, we reckoned that the most dangerous weapon we had was an officer with a map and a compass. And of course, now we're trying to chase Nixon, who was a lieutenant in the Indian Army, and the position he gives us. And who's chasing him? A retired major in the Australian Army. Double jeopardy, that one, don't like your chances. Anyway, this is his latitude, and it goes all the way through, like this country here, flat, nothing, all the way across to the Stuart Highway. And there is no mountain in there. There's no Mount Singapore, there's no water, nothing. How do I know that? About 2 years ago, I flew all this country looking for it. Just like this, all the way across. Latitude-wise, I think we've got a bit of a problem.
This is Nixon's latitude, 18